Okay, so my school's not in class right now and they're not doing online yet. So I just have an example of the slides I would use, and I put together a PowerPoint to kind of show each part since I don't have all the materials at my disposal at home. So I'm going to go ahead and go through the PowerPoint and kind of describe kind of what I would do in class. So my assignment would be what makes up a sentence, and this is my example. So I'd print out the story for all of them. We'd use highlighters. I have my definition slides presented on here, and my terminology and vocab would be just the slides that I have in handout form. And then obviously I would use my overhead projector, or if it was a pretty small group, I could print off my own materials the same as theirs and kind of go through on a bigger scale and show them my example as they follow along. So the point of this activity is to teach them about nouns and pronouns and their part within the stories. So those will be defined to the students, and then we'll use a story to help them identify nouns and pronouns within that story. So we'll go through together and highlight the nouns and underline the pronouns. And I'm using a short story because it's an easy reading level, and for an example, it's shorter, and we'll be able to discuss more and get through the story. So my first slide is nouns. So that's a person, place, or thing used to identify. We talk about proper nouns. Then we'll move on to pronouns, and that's a word that references a noun and references a person without using a proper noun. So I have examples like this, she, he, it, I, and you. Then we'll talk about sentence structure. So what do they need to construct a proper sentence? So they need like a noun or a pronoun. They need an action or a verb, and then adjectives and adverbs to kind of put some fluff in there. So characters we talk about as a person in a novel, play, or movie, someone described in the story, and someone who partakes in actions within that story. I would put an example like this one we're doing, the city mouse and the country mouse. And this is the short story to kind of show the students an example of where we can find nouns and pronouns in the different sentence structure, and we'll go sentence by sentence. So we'll read it together aloud, and then through the next example, then we have highlighting the nouns, so we'll go sentence by sentence. So a country mouse invited his cousin who lived in the city to come visit him. So what part of the sentence contains the noun? So mouse is a noun, so we do that, and then we can go through and say, okay, the city mouse, also mouse is a noun. So we'll go through the entire story sentence by sentence and pick out the nouns. And then the next part of that, we would take the same paper that we have highlighted the nouns, and we would go through and underline the pronouns. So in the first sentence, a country mouse invited his cousin who lived in the city to come visit him. So his would be underlined because it is a pronoun, and him would be underlined because that is also a pronoun. So we would go through and we talk about his in reference to the mouse, the country mouse, and him is also in reference to the country mouse. So that's a pronoun. Instead of saying a country mouse invited a country mouse's cousin, that's how we would kind of go through and explain. And once we went through this, after each sentence or even each answer, we would talk about if anyone had any questions and why these are nouns, and why they're important to the story, and how silly it would sound if we didn't have pronouns and we just used nouns, kind of like my example before. And then just working through to kind of understand that we need these parts of the sentence to make up a story and how important it is. And then we could also talk about, how we're going to progress and then go into verbs and adjectives for the next assignment. But I would definitely go through with my small group and make sure that they understand. And when it got to the middle or the end of the sentence, we would start I would give them each a sentence in the small group and see if they could pick those out, and then we would go through and talk about each one. So I definitely give them guidance, and then we would move more toward independence, but still have that checking with your peers and stuff like that. So I would be providing all the materials that they need, because they would be printouts and such. So at the end of that, obviously, we would work toward more of their reading level. But as just the prime example, I would do like the City Mouse and the Country Mouse, because it's a short story and it's easy to follow, and it has so many examples of nouns and pronouns. So it's a great example to go through for a small group.